Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our Throwback Friday. And for this week, I'm here with my good friend Ryan Andersoff. For those of you who don't know Ryan, shame on you first that you don't know Ryan. Ryan, you've been a mover and shaker, a key architect really of digital transformation in Canada for a while now. My first real gig, well, second gig in government was with the GC Tools team, which you helped found and really build into something. And then, of course, Canadian Digital Services, which you were a key architect for. You've had your own consulting firm, Think Digital. And now you are at the Institute on Governance as their VP of learning and leadership. So this is something you've been in this space for quite some time. So I was quite excited when you suggested a book that has shaped you, and particularly because it's one that has also shaped me. But I'm very curious to hear about it. So you picked the book Wiki Government by Beth Noveck. Could you sort of share a bit about what the book is about?
Yeah, so Wiki Government for me was a foundational book that kind of came right at the time that I was starting to think pretty deeply around what government looks like in the age of social media, what people were calling government 2.0. And really, the book came out, I think, in early 2010. And this was early days of the Obama administration. This was kind of right in the midst of, the early optimism around social media, people thinking about what they were calling government 2.0 and what social media was going to mean for government. And so Beth Noveck, who wrote the book, at the time, she had just become Deputy Chief Technology Officer for the U.S. government under President Obama. I think she was responsible for the Open Government Program and previously had been academic. She had an affiliation with Harvard. So I was at the Harvard Kennedy School during this time in the second year of my Master's of Public Policy program. And I was interested in this issue around technology and the future of government. And so the book really looks at exploring what a kind of a new operating model could be for government in the era of digital and the era of social media. Because I think, her thesis in there essentially is, if I recall, because it's been a few years since I read the book, but, the two extremes tended to be kind of our traditional democratic systems, which in many cases go back, hundreds of years. And we're feeling a little bit not up to task in terms of where democracy was at in 2010, I could argue even more so in 2026. But then the alternative people tend to go to was direct democracy, that we should just have people voting on everything, which has a whole variety of potential downsides to it. And so I think what that book for me was super interesting that came out of it was essentially she was saying, how do we actually carve a third path for this, which is a more kind of participatory and different form of government. And this was, where Wikipedia was really kind of becoming into full bloom. And so hence the title of the book, Wiki Government, this idea of could you apply the same principles of a wiki and, rethinking how the encyclopedia works like Wikipedia did and take that and apply it to how government works as kind of a third way of approaching this.
So when you look at, that was 2010, it's been a few years now, but it sounds like this is a book that continues to shape and influence the work that you're doing now. Where do you see it really influencing your work? Where do you think about it as you engage with things now?
Yeah, it comes back to me all the time, right? And when the book came out, I was doing my master's program, was getting interested in this. I will say the book actually in many ways kind of inspired me to do my thesis project at Harvard, which was actually looking at a municipal level in the city of Somerville, which is right next door to where Harvard is, how they were doing data-driven decision-making and citizen engagement, and like thinking about kind of new models of citizen engagement that technology would open up. And to me, the big thing is, and I'm still convinced, 16 years later, it's the case, is that we really haven't kind of rethought the operating infrastructure of how government works, right? Like we're kind of taking old models and slapping a layer of digital paint on it. You kind of see it in, how government does consultation processes a lot of times, where it's just traditional consultations, but it's up on a website somewhere, right? And this idea of actually rethinking how we engage, and what's revolutionary about, I think, some of the concepts she was putting out there was we're not just saying, hey, we're going to do traditional representative democracy and have online voting, or we're not going to just kind of go to a direct democracy where it's can somewhat be mob rule and everybody votes on everything. It's on the wiki saying, there are going to be certain things that people have particular expertise and insights on, and how do we actually harness those in a much more nuanced way to get better public policy outcomes, not just kind of jump on this notion of everybody kind of has the say on everything, because in today's world, which is so big, so complex, and moving so fast, it's kind of unrealistic either to have, a small number of elected representatives who are going to know the answer on everything, or to have everybody voting on everything, because both of those lead to kind of very bad paths. And we've seen, there's a couple of examples you're probably really familiar with. Taiwan, I think, has done some very interesting stuff on kind of deliberative democracy and building some platforms in the last 10 years that kind of stem from this. There's been some examples in Scandinavian countries and others. But I will say, I still think about today, a lot of our discussions around digital are very much about, having better digital services and having better online experiences. All that's good. But, you've heard me talk about my Pac-Man model a lot, about thinking about getting beyond culture and thinking about what are the structures and incentives of the organization. And I will say Wiki Government to me is kind of like that. It's a great book to think about that issue of how do we actually maybe rethink our underlying structures of governance. I think this conversation will probably inspire me to go reread it, because I suspect a lot of what's in there is as relevant today as it would have been back then.
But it's interesting that you mentioned this book because it's 2010, so it's been a while, and the vision that Beth lays out in the book is still one that we're striving. Some countries I think are getting there, but for sure in Canada, and I think many other countries are still striving to do it. And it kind of reminds me, a couple of days ago, I had a chance to catch up with a friend of mine named Brenton Caffin from Australia, and he mentioned, we were chatting about this because AI is the thing now, right? And so AI is this big, exciting thing, but how is it going to change government? And we started talking, he mentioned this woman named Carletta Perez, who's done a lot of writing about this idea that it takes, when you have these technological revolutions, it takes a generation or two to move from just adopting the new technology, but in the old frameworks, the old structures, the old ways of thinking. Yep. It takes you need to have people who are immersed in it from birth to really understand that we can reorganize how society works. And so I look at Beth Noveck's work as this is sort of this vision, but I think it's taking us a generation or two to actually start putting that vision into practice. Then of course AI is coming, it's going to take us another, generation or two to really build that at the center. But I agree, I think it's a visionary document that we're still falling short on. So well worth rereading.
Yeah, and it I remember when I was reading it back at the time, it just always kind of made me think that, we inherit a lot of past decisions around how government works, how society works, that are just, we talk about legacy tech a lot of times, but really we're talking about legacy institutions, legacy policies, legacy legislation. A country like Canada, that goes back hundreds of years. There's countries that are older than us where it goes back even further. And the thought experiment always is, if we were to have a whiteboard and say, what does our country look like today? There's no way we would design our governance systems the way they are. We're kind of working with what we have because we've inherited it. And I feel a book like Wiki Government kind of forces you to say, if we did have the proverbial whiteboard, what could we do today, and what would kind of a new form of governance in 2026, because we have the ability to communicate instantly and have the ability to kind of share information and aggregate information in entirely different ways than were even physically possible in 1867. It opens up some new pathways. And so I think it kind of, for me, it was the spark of kind of the aha moment to say, this is much bigger than just social media and, having a president or a prime minister who can, go on social media and post, to millions of people. It actually is starting to say, hey, maybe some of the underlying assumptions behind how we do things maybe don't have to hold valid anymore. And there's an ability to kind of rethink what good governance looks like in the digital age. And I think that's, it's still an aspiration 16 years later from when that book came out, but it's one that still comes to my mind. And I think at a fundamental level still drives a lot of my work.
I think it's brilliant. And just giving us imagination and the ability to dream beyond what is right now, I think is going to be so important in this time of massive transformation.
Yeah.
So Ryan, thank you so much for making time and sharing with me this book that has meant so much to you. And I'm excited to pick it up again as well and reacquaint myself with all these ideas and this vision and the stuff that really inspire me as I travel the world. So
yeah, thanks so much, Derek. And I hope, I've never actually had the chance to meet Beth. And so I hope she hears your clip, and I hope she recognizes that at least in one small way, her book definitely had a very big impact on me, and I'm sure many others. And I think planting those seeds that hopefully one day spark something bigger to happen.
Well, Beth, you've heard it here first. Your book has had a big impact on both Ryan and me, and we'd love to hear from you. And write more books. Looking forward. I know she's been continuing to write lots of. I keep up with her blog and stuff, and it's one of the places I continue to draw inspiration from. So
agreed completely.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Ryan. And
Thank you.
Have a great weekend. Hey.